It makes all the difference in the world. And so for us, the big question that I'm going to get the panel to talk about is going to be this. How do we define substantive partnerships across institutions in a community? I would argue that we in higher education, and I was saying that to my fellow president a little while ago, really have a challenge because we tend to think we have the answers. We've taught the teachers, and yet I hear some of my graduates saying, if some of these professors came to my classroom, they couldn't make it because they don't understand how children have changed over the years and the challenges that we face. The idea of bringing families is critical, and a part of that has to do with the fact that we need to think about not only the important teachers and leaders, but also the role of families. The reason my colleagues and I wrote books on raising high-achieving African-American children, one for boys, one for girls, in science, was that it was so clear to me that in this Meyerhoff program, where we are producing black kids in a predominantly white setting who go on to get MD, PhDs from Harvard to Stanford, that one of the reasons these kids have been able to make it is that they had someone in the family who understood the importance of connecting to the school and being involved in the education. And what's really encouraging is at least 60% of my Meyerhoff scholars are not from families where anyone went to college. In some cases, it's just a grandmother. But the idea of being connected, learning how to ask some questions, looking at the homework, expecting more, being more old-fashioned, quite frankly, about when they start dating and making sure you're talking to them. These kinds of practices amazingly help more than you might expect. And so on this continuum, when thinking about what a university can do, we've got high-achieving kids on the one end, minorities and others, and then on the other end, if you go to the UMBC webpage, you will see something called the Shriver Center, named after Sergeant Eunice Shriver. Their son worked there for a while, one of their sons. And we have a fascinating program we've had as long as this Meyerhoff program at the top end, which is called the Choice Program. We have supervised 500 boys mainly, of color, a few poor white kids, but mainly black and Hispanic, who are first-time offenders. We've been doing this for over 20 years. And the reason we've continued to get money from the Department of Juvenile Services, talking about substantive partnerships, working with the court system and with judges, is that we have had assessment as the key to understanding what's working and what is not from the very beginning. So whether I'm talking about the Meyerhoff program or I'm talking about programs with K through 12 in terms of math teachers and producing them, or talking about working with poor children to help them stay out of trouble, we have made assessment something that you don't add on at the end, but something you begin with. And so what is the vision? What is the vision for these children? When will we know we've succeeded? How do you define outcomes? What are the strategies? Who are the people? And so we literally supervise these children 24 hours a day. Now mine is a middle-class campus, predominantly white. 25 years ago, when it was 1989, same time we started this Meyerhoff, when I first said we were going to bring these kids to campus, most of my colleagues said, you're going to bring these criminals to campus? Because it sounds dangerous. They've all committed some kind of nonviolent crime. My point was they were children between the ages of 8 and 15. And what has happened is that the reason we continue to get the funding from the state and other money is literally that we can show that there is a statistically significant difference between the children who've been in our program and they're staying out of jail and they're staying alive and they're graduating from high school compared to kids who've not had this kind of intervention. The problem with it is that usually the intervention is for a year and a half at most. You get them on the right track and you move ahead. But the key to it has been building community again among those children. So whether talking about special programs for people who are going to teach and building community so they can reflect on the experiences, or giving teachers in the schools a chance to reflect on their experiences, or talking about children and their problems, when you can build trust among a group in the same way that many of the Ivies have the posse programs. You see, it's the same idea of having community where you've got people you trust and can work with, and you've got expectations, and you all work to those expectations. And the final part, I would say, has to do with my work as chair of the Marguerite Casey Foundation. We give out maybe $40 million a year, and we focus on low-income children and families around the country. That's in Seattle, but we work with the 5 states that have the 40% of all poor children. People think it's the Deep South, but it's not. It's the largest states: Texas, Illinois, Florida, New York, California. We do other things, but we start there, and what we're doing is the same kind of thing you're doing, and that is we're trying to identify practices and leverage our funds, because foundation's money is nothing like what the government uses. We know that. How do we use our foundation money to leverage with other big bucks in order to help shape policies and change practices? And in each of these cases, so for Marguerite Casey, we have a philosophy that says you ask, you listen, and you act. And the idea is that we, as these middle-class, advantaged people with foundations, may have great understanding of the need to make a difference, but we need to listen to families, particularly low-income families at work, and make them the experts. Same thing I say in my books. Those families are the experts with their children. How do we help them feel like they're experts? How do we help them get connected to the schools? How do we empower them in organizing in such a way that they can make a difference and help them understand it doesn't have to be adversarial. I love the fact that you're working to get people to work together. The adversarial relationships will make us like Congress right now. One side or another side, and what Americans too often will do is wait until their turn, but they're not listening to what the other person is saying. They're simply getting ready to make the best argument to win the case. The challenge we face when we think about people going across areas, across institutions, is we all, whether it's higher education, K through 12, foundation world, the corporate sector, have to be willing to believe we have a part of the solution, but we need to attack the problem with the kind of rigor we use in solving cancer issues, for example, and we need to be willing to believe that others can add to the conversation. Good listening makes a difference in terms of how you act. I'll close with this one example. One of our programs involves helping students to become prepared to teach this middle school mathematics and science in very challenging schools, and many of the students doing this are middle-class whites. And one of my students, who just happened to have the same name as my mother, Maggie, was doing math and biology, and she was 5'3", a young blonde woman, and she said, I started working with athletes, and I figured out that they may look hard and tough, but they really need support. And I like doing this, and so I'm ready to do this. She said, I have only one fear, and that is, if a fight starts in the classroom, what am I supposed to do? I'm 105 pounds. And if I send the kids out of the room, I lose all respect. Now, they were reflecting in the group, and this is what she decided. The group gave her some techniques, and this is what happened. She came one day and she said, Dr. Hrabowski, because I like listening to their experiences, she said, I now have my street creds. I said, what are you talking about, street creds? I've got my street credits. How'd you get them? A fight started, my worst nightmare. Well, I had already told the two biggest guys in the room that they were my secret bouncers. And the idea was this: as soon as these two big guys started fighting other guys, I pointed to my bouncers. Nobody knew what I was doing, and my two bouncers were so proud. They went and got them and pulled them apart. I went and got in the middle, and I said, you will not do this in this classroom. And I made them hold them there until they stopped breathing so hard and calmed down, and the class applauded. She says, I can do anything now. Now that's what community can do. Thank you all very much.